Hello, everyone. This is Neda Ferrier for the Memory and Future Club of AFUS, the Association of Former UNESCO staff members. Welcome to this new edition of our video talks. Our guests today are Dafna Feinholz, UNESCO's Chief of Bioethics and Ethics of Science and Technology, and her colleague Maksim Karliuk, a renowned specialist in this field. Both have worked hard on a draft recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. This groundbreaking document that has been approved in June by an intergovernmental committee of technical and legal experts will be submitted to the member states at UNESCO General Conference in November. When adopted, it will become the first global standard-setting instrument in this field. Dafna and Maksim speak about it with Frederick Russell, who recently joined AFUS and our club. Russ, the floor is yours.
And I'd like to welcome our participants for this newest interview that we're having. First of all, I'm wondering, Dafna, if you could sort of set the stage of why is such a recommendation important in today's world?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much to Neda and to you for this kind invitation to Maksim and to myself to share with you and all the colleagues of this work that we are doing, because it's true that it is a very important endeavor for UNESCO and for the world, we hope. And the reason is because we know that artificial intelligence is really having an impact in all the realms of our life and is becoming an issue that raises ethical questions because it's becoming a tool that is, on one hand, being used to make decisions that are very important for the future of humanity and in different areas of our life, for example, in the health care or in the judiciary, even in wars, and but in everything, like for example, if you are going to get a loan from the bank, or sometimes as we have heard also, for example, the case in the UK very recently during the pandemic when some students were ranked in their university. So the fact that they are being used to make decisions, the concern about this is not new. This is why it has been called also an anthropological turnover, you know, because it's not only a technological change, but it's because of all this. It's really changing the social tissue, the way we interact each other, the way education is affected. So mainly the areas that UNESCO is working on are basically the most touched upon, because it is also has been used, for example, for art, for creativity, you know, for all these issues of Spotify or reproducing artworks. So all this is really very close to what UNESCO does also. But also in communication, it has a very important influence, because we have all this misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, all these echo chambers. So all these influences on how people perceive the world and how they are interacting with each other. So, I mean, there are many, many examples. I don't want to dwell too much on it. I hope that this would be more or less important now. So the issue is that there are many initiatives regionally and at the national level to try to have some frameworks on how to deal with this. So on one hand, it's good because we have already some attempts to try to tackle these ethical challenges. But I think the importance of this recommendation is, first of all, because it's the only one that will be global, because there is a need to have a global umbrella, because there are the different initiatives, only respond to the needs and the voices of a few if you go to the regional level. And UNESCO is the only global one with our larger membership of 193 countries. On the other hand, is the only one that really includes the Global South, and which is also very important because the rest of the initiatives are mainly from countries of the North. The other very important reason to have this recommendation is because it's the only one that really is tackling from the ethical point of view. The other initiatives are really more based on policy making or driven by economic interests. But this one, although it also takes into account all the economical aspects and all the economical perspectives, and for example also takes care of the labor market, the starting point is ethics. And you know, this is the only, UNESCO is the only UN agency that has this mandate, and we have a track record very long of establishing normative instruments in the area. Not only in bioethics with the human genome and human rights, the genomic data, bioethics and human rights, but also the ethical principles in climate change, and the recommendation on scientific researchers. Now, this is why it's very important, because we need something that will enable the whole world to share some ethical perspective and enable everybody to tackle these challenges from the ethical point of view. But this recommendation has also two more advantages. One is that it goes beyond a set of principles, because in many other initiatives, we have a lot of principles settled down, prescribed. But it's a very comprehensive document that starts from some values that are the pillars that we have to rely on, then that inspire some concrete principles, but it goes beyond that. It goes to, these principles are then spelled out and translated into concrete policy actions with concrete recommendations for member states and for the private sector to comply. And as you know, we have a process of reporting every 4 years for member states when they adopt a recommendation, but also we are developing 2 specific tools to help member states to implement the recommendation. One is the ethical impact assessment, and the other one is the readiness methodology, to try to see how ready a country is to implement this technology, to embrace it from many perspectives: technological, cultural, social, because we have countries that are still grappling with having internet access, and some others are already very much advanced. So we have to have a very comprehensive. And the last 2 things I will say, and I will ask Maksim if he wants to add something, is that another very important, 2 important features of our recommendation, or 3, is one is that it's the only one that is making a lot of emphasis on environment, because normally when we think about artificial intelligence, everybody thinks about how do we use artificial intelligence to remedy the climate change and environmental problems, but we never think about or solve, or very few occasions, how the use of AI and the development of all the devices that we need to use it, or to collect data and to save data, is harming already in a very dramatic way the environment. The second one is the gender perspective. It's really a very transformative oriented document. And the third one is of course, the cultural diversity, but most importantly, the process of inclusiveness and also the involvement of civil society in all the reflection of how to assess the impact of these technologies and how to be involved in the policy making.
Could I concentrate a bit on the elaboration of the document, and especially the consultations that took place over the past few years? I think, Maksim, you were hired specifically to move us through the process to getting to where we are today. So my question is, how were not only member states, but other participants, civil society organizations, involved in the process of coming to where we are today, and how accepting was everybody about UNESCO's approach at building such a document? I believe it all began in 2018, 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you very much. Very good to be here. Yeah, in terms of the process, I would say that it was a very inclusive process. So indeed, the decision was adopted by the General Conference to develop this document, the recommendation, as a normative legal act in 2019, in November 2019. But I was based already on the work was done by the by UNESCO's COMEST. So, and afterwards, it was the ad hoc expert group that was nominated by and established by the Director General, which was composed of experts from diverse cultural backgrounds and all geographical regions. And they are leading scientists and professionals with extensive knowledge of the technological and ethical aspects of artificial intelligence, who actually did the first draft. And in fact, it was basically, they started their work when the COVID pandemic struck, which actually put a lot of pressure on them, on UNESCO to develop this. But as we know, technologies, they don't wait. And in fact, with COVID, we saw that they proliferated even more in our daily lives, as what Dafna was mentioning. I mean, we can talk about the separate, what they bring in more challenges because of that, or they just highlighted particular concerns which are to be addressed even more by the recommendation. And in the end, after the ad hoc expert group, they developed the first draft. Indeed, there was a massive consultation process that took place on global scale, on global level, through online consultations, also on regional level, also with different groups of stakeholders were involved, including young people, including the private sector companies, etc., etc. And this consultation process garnered more than we calculated about like 50,000 comments from diversity of stakeholders, which also had to be assessed, analyzed, and then integrated in the draft text. And eventually, all this consultation process took place basically last summer. And eventually, the expert group, they updated the text, which was submitted to the member states for their comments, which they did, and then UNESCO was tasked to incorporate their comments. And in fact, we also did it in a very inclusive way, although the process is led by social and human sciences sector. But at the same time, we involved all other sectors of UNESCO, because the document addresses all of the fields of all of the competences of UNESCO. And in fact, we spent quite a lot of time consulting, having online meetings with our colleagues of focal points of each sector of UNESCO, integrating those comments that came from member states. And eventually, I'm kind of showing the route, how it went. Eventually, the intergovernmental negotiations took place, which were quite long, quite intense, and Dafna can confirm how intense it was, with lots of interest. Because as Dafna mentioned at the beginning, you have 193 states, all with different interests, different concerns want to be reflected. Sometimes even outside of the kind of core substance of the document, because there are other concerns that have been, other interests are also involved. But in the end, with the great leadership of the chair of this intergovernmental meeting, chair of the bureau, and with the support from the secretariat, managed to actually preserve a very strong original substance of this recommendation, which actually will deliver, if adopted, will deliver really good results, which we very much expect and really need.
Can you say that this is sort of the I'm trying to get at the sort of the value of UNESCO as a convener, as a moderator of ideas, and the power of multilateralism from a UNESCO perspective to build a document. Maksim, you said that in the end, the solid document was managed to maintain despite or because of intense negotiations. So from a multilateral perspective, how engaging was this kind of an operation, bringing member states together, and adding value to UNESCO's core mandate in the area of science and technology, and especially the ethics of science and technology?
Well, just want to add two things to what Maksim said. We also involved very closely the UN system in the consultation. I think it is important to tell you. The UN system individually, but also through the HLCP, they were consulted, and they were very much supporting the work of UNESCO, because in fact, now they have established a working group on AI at that level, and it's going to be co-led by UNESCO and ITU. So I think this is important because it has been recognized. It's one of the results of this consultation, and I guess it's also partly answering your question about, although it's at the level of the Secretariat, but it's positioning UNESCO as one of the conveners of member states to discuss these issues, and from the ethical point of view, because it was recognized that we have ITU that is dealing with technical issues, but everything that is social, ethical, cultural, it's lacking, and so it's the role of UNESCO to complement and to contribute. So I think that's partly as answering your question. The other thing I have to say is that is related to what you said, is related to the process that Maksim was describing, that it was really a saga. First of all, I want to tell you, this is the first meeting, intergovernmental meeting, that is held virtually. Nobody thought these kind of negotiations could take place virtually. So as Maksim was saying, technologies proved to also be useful, and WhatsApp groups substituted the corridor talks and lobbies and discussions between member states and among member states. And it was very tough, because at the beginning, it went very long. Originally we had only 2 weeks planned to these meetings, and then it took more than a month, because we had to hold intergovernmental meetings, intergovernmental sessions, because in the first meeting, the recommendation is also the longest in history of UNESCO. It's 180 something items. So you can imagine discussing them. So the first week we covered 14. So you can think that there was no way to finish. So there was this, and so there were criteria, which I think it will also respond to what you said. The chair, as Maksim said, he was very good, and he established very concrete criteria of how are we going to integrate these comments. And I think it starts the response to your question, that basically it was, let's try not to water down the document. It's something very, very important for everyone. Let's try to preserve the substance. Let's not dwell in the little details. Let's try to focus on what is the good for everyone. Let's try not to also reopen discussions and things like that. But in my view, the fact that everybody was trying to accomplish something that they understood it was valuable, it's what really changed, because the other details are more technical. If you don't repeat, grammar. But I think the motivation was, let's preserve this document because we all see a value in this document. So let's try to just really, really, really push for the red lines, and else we will go with the flow. And there were many issues, like regarding issues on data, gender, private sector, data protection. So they were not so easy to solve. But even so, the member states at the beginning, you saw clear positions that were clashing, and at the end you saw everybody trying to build bridges, because they all recognized that there was no other document that could help in this way. But I interrupted Maksim, and I want him also to give his view, because he was also so much involved. We were all...
No. You did perfectly covered everything. I would just how to say indeed it was very important what Dafna said at the beginning, that involvement of the UN system from the start. And in fact, what's interesting is that there were some substantive points we were hesitant about whether to cover within the recommendation or not, because we say, okay, there are other international organizations and they have, maybe we're encroaching on their mandate or something like that. But no, in fact, we get a confirmation from others. No, yes, you do. You should cover that, because this is ethical aspects of, let's say, of labor, which are super important in the age of AI and the impact on the workforce. They should be reflected in the recommendation. And I mean, having this kind of support from other agencies is what was really great, and of course other comments of them were very helpful in developing the substance of the recommendation. In terms of, I mean, Dafna has already basically covered everything. I would just add this elements that, or this, what UNESCO brings, as UNESCO has sort of this ethical mandate within the UN system, but on top also sort of an added value of UNESCO is also this, as Dafna mentioned at the beginning, it's global character, but also this multidisciplinary character, also how pluralistic of a platform it is, which can bring this dialogue, create this dialogue on the ethics of AI, and bring together both developed and developing countries, what as Dafna said, of this global South, different cultural perspective as well. In this global world of 193 states, member states of the organization, and of course involve various stakeholders within the public and private spheres through the consultations, and eventually which we will work with them hopefully in the implementation process as well. Just a few points here.
So one last question, and then we have to wrap up. Let's sort of fast forward to November 2021. Do you think that the proactive, positive dynamic of the session, the expert group session that you had in June, will be followed through in the discussions at the General Conference? And without gazing into a crystal ball, let's suppose that the recommendations actually are adopted. Where do we go from there? Once the recommendations are adopted, what happens? Your ADG mentioned that this will become a blueprint of the what and the how of ethical recommendations in this area. So what will happen the following day once the recommendations are adopted?
So it's true, yes, this what and how dimension is very important, because also Dafna mentioned at the beginning that we are not only outlining the values and principle, which is super important because we bring lots of added value and new ideas there, including new values, or at least elevating like the issue of environment to the level of values, which was not previously the case. And but indeed it's important that the recommendation provides clear guidance on the how to move forward and to achieve this impact by proposing policy action areas related to education, research, culture, gender, diversity, data, environment, etc., etc. So there is a list of concrete policy actions with concrete steps which could be done. But also another important thing is not just outlining them and even the policy areas, but also providing specific tools on how to implement them. And Dafna mentioned them in the beginning as well. These are two very practical, concrete tools, which are ethical impact assessment and readiness methodology. So this would be the main tools for the implementation of the recommendations. So ethical impact assessment aims to assess, to monitor and evaluate ethical impacts of AI systems on societies and to take action on that. And it will cover the whole life cycle of AI algorithms and assess both the direct impact on human societies and the environment, as well as indirect impact and long-term effect. This is something that we will develop also with the help of an expert group. And the readiness assessment methodology is sort of this readiness benchmarking methodology to identify the status of countries in terms of how prepared they are to implement the recommendation in terms of various dimensions, from science to social, societal, cultural, and other dimensions. And we also recognize that it is a dynamic status, and countries will be able to use the methodology frequently in order to track their advancement across different dimensions and to effectively eventually implement the recommendation. So, and indeed, really hope that definitely that General Conference will follow this long and very substantive and very inclusive process of developing this recommendation and do adopt it. And we go into implementation phase, because as I also mentioned at the beginning, there is technologies don't wait. I mean, there is no real time to wait more to develop the document further, but it's really time to act. And in fact, as I said also at the beginning, that COVID resulted in unprecedented acceleration of digitalization, of using AI with all of these benefits, of course, that we mentioned, helped us to actually work on the document. There are lots of risks of biases, the gender biases or other biases, and the malicious use of these technologies, lots of legal uncertainty of how these technologies are to be governed and to be regulated on national and international levels, and many other things.
So if I just may add, Ross, what will be the next day is that we have started already to think about these tools, these concrete tools. There are already some member states interested. We have some proposals already submitted for funding, and I think they were kind of waiting for the approval. And the funding is already to start the development of these tools, particularly for Africa and SIDS. So that proves again that UNESCO is also tackling these areas of the world that are less developed and more in need to be able to deal with ethical challenges of AI. And we are, I think, part of what we are going to do is we have, through the consultations, we also have created a mass, of people that are interested. This network of both experts and civil society and private sector. So we will continue with this. We continue to build more on concrete outcomes with all these partners that we have started. It has been one of the results of the consultation. So it will be an issue of really now moving into more concrete actions to be able to enable member states to really implement it and then be able to report every 4 years on what they are doing. So we think this is really going to be like the new, opens a new area of work for UNESCO, because of course all the sectors will be involved, because the impact assessment and the readiness methodology will include also the actions of the rest of the sectors, because as Maksim said, it's the different dimensions and aspects, but it's also in all the different areas of work. So in a way, it will also provide UNESCO itself with a new framework to work and to develop and to deploy its programs.
Let me thank you both very much for a stimulating conversation that you've had that helps the AFUS members understand more the work that's currently being done in the area of ethics. And especially within the realm of artificial intelligence. It's always good to talk with colleagues and who are willing to share their information and their knowledge with former colleagues who are members of the AFUS. The process through which you have described a dynamic and engaging flow towards the General Conference in November this year is really interesting one. And also the fact that not only were you able to pull together all of the sort of the key stakeholders throughout the globe, and especially the Global South, dealing with ethical aspects of the implementation of artificial intelligence as a technology that impacts humanity itself. You've also shared with us the fact that within UNESCO itself, you're transforming through this type of work, you're transforming the way we work together as colleagues. I know we used to discuss things like cross-cutting initiatives, intersectoral activities, but this sounds like a sort of an innate way of bringing all of the sectors together, without having to say this is intersectoral collaboration. You're just genuinely pulling all of the colleagues together because of the need for the value that UNESCO can bring in bringing science, bringing communication, bringing culture to the same table when tackling an international global issue such as this one. So thank you very much for sharing your insights with us over the last half an hour. It was a pleasure to see you both again.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Same, Ross. And it's still strange to see you as a former. You're too, too recently former. But it's a pleasure. And thank you, Neda, as well.
Yes, thank you to both. That was the most interesting exchange. And I hope, I wish you the best of success at the General Conference. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.